97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco.
My first allegiance is what will be best for the Philadelphia Eagles and our fans for the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
It is Football at 4. It's powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, you can hear us every day at 4 o'clock talking football. And it's brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back. For everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery, go to iloveLyleBack.com or call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4. Don't forget the Inside the Birds podcast. It drops Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 6 a.m., right here on the Sports Bash Live is Andrew DiCecco. We're talking a little bit about this Eagles offseason, the NFL. We'll get his thoughts on this Deshaun Watson stuff as well as the draft. But some of the key battles that are going on in Eagles camp coming up, we'll get his thoughts on that. I do want to get Andrew's thoughts on, because I think he'll have some really good insight here, which is the Eagles' new quarterback coach, Brian Johnson, and what you know about him, Andrew, and what do you think of, what does that hiring kind of show you? He knows Hurts, has a background with Hurts, but how Brian Johnson could excite you to work with Carson Wentz.
Yeah, well, you know what, Mike? To be honest, that was one of the better hires out of his entire staff. I'm really intrigued with what Brian Johnson can bring to that quarterback's room. Quite frankly, he's a young coach that's really ascended through the ranks. He's someone that's going to command a lot of respect right off the bat, knowing his past history as a successful quarterback at Utah. He went 13-0 in 2008, I believe, and just you go down the list of his accomplishments. I mean, he was a 2007 Poinsettia Bowl offensive MVP. 2008 All, Mountain West Conference first team, 2009 Sugar Bowl MVP. This guy has the accolades to command respect. He's played the game at a high level. And you also look at look at his progression, right? He was the quarterback's coach at Utah in 2010 after, a brief stint with the New York Sentinels right after his college career. But then he goes from Utah to Mississippi State, and he coaches Dak Prescott and Nick Fitzgerald, two highly touted quarterbacks at the time, had great success with Dak Prescott, goes to Houston, works with De'Aaron King, who's now with the Miami Hurricanes, and Kyle Allen, who's with the Washington football team, had success with those guys, goes to Florida, does his thing there with Kyle Trask. I mean, he made Kyle Trask a Heisman candidate, and then he becomes the offensive coordinator. So you see all this progression, and it's steady. It's a steady progression for a coach who's only 33 years old. And, just being well-versed and dealing with all these different types of quarterbacks and having that level of success at such a young age, I think there's a lot to be intrigued with Brian Johnson.
Now, all the connections to Hurts, is that just, a convenient addition to this story, or do you put any stock behind it?
Well, I mean, it's hard not to, but I try not to read into it, because if you look at, yes, he does have that connection with Hurts. He's known him since I believe he was 4 years old. But then also you look at the work that he did with Kyle Trask, who has a very similar skill set to Carson Wentz. And he got Kyle Trask to play at a high level and kind of rid himself of some of those previous tendencies that really held him back. So, I mean, I think he's a good hire regardless of who your quarterback is. I never like to read it between the lines. Oh, he has history with Hurts. He knew Hurts for a while. Hurts is the guy. You just kind of got to let these things play out and see where it goes, because, Carson spoke today, but he didn't address any of the issues, but we don't know where he stands on anything. We don't know if he wants to be here. We don't know the conversations that he's had. So it's premature to speculate. So I mean, we'll have to let it play out. But I think regardless of who the quarterback is moving forward, I think that there's a lot to like there with Brian Johnson.
Real quick, he said Carson spoke. He posted on Twitter a congratulations to Rodney McLeod, and that was the only reference. He did not really say anything. So Andrew's right. He spoke. he only really posted a video of him congratulating his teammate.
Right, and I was going to bring up, since we're on the quarterback conversation, we were kind of just talking about this before the last break ended, but do you think that Wentz should say something at this point? Is there a benefit? I mean, is his silence somewhat telling us what we need to know? I mean, he hasn't said a word, really, and we're talking about 7 weeks or so.
Well, silence certainly speaks volumes here. Hunter, and you and I we touched on this last time when I was on Tuesday, and at this stage, too much time has passed for him to really kind of solve anything or kind of settle any kind of questions that are kind of lingering. I mean, there's going to be he's going to be kind of scrutinized one way or the other. People are going to be looking at his body language. People are going to be looking at his delivery and does he look like, trying to read his mannerisms and things like that. I mean, it would have been, I thought the time for him to say something would have been shortly after the Doug Peterson firing. Thanks for everything that you did to help me, since I started. He was his first head coach in the National Football League. And then certainly the windows certainly closed shortly after that article came out from the Inquirer. So, I mean, right now I don't necessarily know what him saying anything is really going to solve, but it was a little surprising that he didn't say anything, given the things that have kind of transpired over the offseason.
Yeah, I agree with you that everything would be nitpicked, but just to continue with that, isn't that going to happen on the field with every throw, every snap, every kill? Everything about anything Carson Wentz does to this point is going to be insanely nitpicked, and that just concerns me for the future. Can you move forward with someone that it's going to be dissected more than anything we've ever seen, and in this city, it already is obnoxious?
Yeah, I mean, every single day, Hunter, we see something that people are, kind of inferring, speculating. Is Carson going to speak? Every hire is kind of looked at. Is this a hire for Carson, or is this more of a hire geared towards Jalen Hurts? Everything's kind of looked at under a microscope, and the silence really creates a lot of this chatter. But it's going to be really hard for Carson to go back into that locker room, given everything that's sort of unraveled. Given the article that came out that detailed him being very difficult to coach and the different things in the film room, and Press Taylor's not here anymore. Everything he does is going to be looked at and scrutinized under a microscope. And I don't know if he just may be over it. Frankly, he just may be. He just got over the Nick Foles thing. Then he had Jalen Hurts closing in on him in practice in the rearview mirror, and then Jalen Hurts became the starter. And sometimes it's just a lot to overcome for a player to mentally, that you almost wonder how can he possibly respond from that kind of adversity, because it's just, everything just keeps piling on. You can't help but wonder if a change of scenery would benefit both him and the Eagles.
So Andrew's with us. We have a listener who's watching on the YouTube channel, says, what does Wentz need to speak about? Come out and address a bunch of BS negative stories? What for? So do you think that Wentz doesn't need to come out and say anything? Does he need to address, like this guy's saying, why does he need to address this stuff? He thinks, if it's BS.
Right. I'm sure he's advised not to speak on it. And, like we were saying, I don't know what him speaking out at this juncture would really solve. I mean, sometimes it's not worth addressing, and you kind of just move forward and the stories go away, and you show up and you speak with your actions. You show that you're ready to play. You show you're ready to compete for a job. And I mean, that's really all he can do is kind of just take it on the chin, move forward, get ready for the 2021 season with a new regime, and move forward.
Tim McManus recently put out a piece that stated that Carson Wentz would scream at his offensive coordinators at North Dakota State, and Frank Reich looked at it as a positive. At what point is this really just crossing the line? I mean, there's so many stories, so many pieces, so many sources. Is this just too much? I mean, you're screaming at, I understand why that would be great from a competitive standpoint, but there's a line, and I just feel like it's clear that he's crossing that line.
Yeah, and I'll say this: you see a lot of people on Twitter. You see a lot of people wondering: are these stories fabricated? Is there any truth behind it? Any validity? Well, I'll say this: the last 3 seasons, you've seen various articles come out, and they're all sort of touching on the same subjects, the same flaws that he has in his game. You heard it from Jeff and Adam this year. You've heard it from multiple reporters this season covering the team. There's something there. Where there's smoke, there's fire. And, for a young head coach in Nick Sirianni, he has so many other things that he's focused on right now. He's trying to establish a culture. He's trying to build a rapport with his players. The last thing you need is dealing with a quarterback with those type of tendencies that's going to possibly undermine you or be insubordinate or think that they have a better method or a better way and question your every decision. I don't think that that's healthy for the kind of culture that's being built there. Carson's proven to be that same guy. I don't necessarily know that he's going to change just because there's a new coach. I mean, if you weren't listening to – if you had issues with a Super Bowl winning head coach, how are you going to respond to a rookie head coach coaching you on some of your flaws?
Yeah, it's a really odd scenario where here's the guy who was the starter. He leaves as the backup, so we didn't have to hear from him. It's been like 8 weeks since he has said anything. It doesn't help either, Andrew, that the coach hasn't come out and talked yet either. Now, he will speak tomorrow at noon. What do you think that Nick Sirianni can say tomorrow that might help some of this?
Man, I mean, there's going to be a lot of questions about the quarterback. You already know that. I mean, I think that he's going to give you safe answers. I don't think that he's going to be definitive one way or the other. I think he's going to, we have 2 good quarterbacks here. We're going to get Carson back on track. And, I believe I'm the guy to do it. Here's my offensive, philosophy. He'll be asked probably a lot about his offensive philosophy and the play calling, this, that, and the other thing. But, I mean, he's going to give you some safe answers. I don't know if there's going to be anything that we could kind of pry away from that press conference that's going to lean one way or the other as to where they're kind of leaning as far as the decision making. But, I mean, there's going to be a lot of questions about the quarterback because there's been nothing but, speculation over the past month or so. So.
I asked Moshe this yesterday. I would love to get your thoughts on it. One thing that intrigues you and one thing that concerns you when it comes to this coaching staff now that it's pretty much formed together.
Well, I like the diversity of the coaching staff. I like that they've had varying degrees of success at different levels. I mean, you look at Steichen and, yes, their offense was kind of maddeningly inconsistent with the Chargers, but they were 6th in the NFL in passing yards. You got a lot out of Justin Herbert, so you're getting a lot of variety there. Jonathan Gannon did a lot of developing with the young Colts secondary last season. Sirianni himself has worked with quarterbacks, wide receivers. He's a bright offensive mind. I pretty much like what they've done from a developmental standpoint, and I think that in the past regime, there wasn't a whole lot of developing going on. So I like the player development aspect of the coaches. What concerns me, though, Hunter, is the youth. I understand that many might say it's not about the age, it's about the quality of the coaches and the experience. Well, I mean, there's a little bit of validity to that, but I mean, you're getting a lot of first-time, play callers here. I mean, that's just what it is. And I probably would have surrounded myself with a veteran defensive coordinator or getting a veteran coach like a Jim Caldwell in there to kind of just to lean on, to bounce ideas off of, because I mean, this is the first time for a lot of these guys, and it can go really well, or it can kind of spiral out of control because there's a whole new sense of responsibility among the coaching staff now.
I know the other day we kind of touched on the new offensive coordinator, Shane Steichen, excuse me. Man, his name is going to drive me nuts over these next couple of months here. But I know you wrote a piece for Inside the Birds. You did a little bit more studying on him. What are some of the things that you found out about him that may be positive or negative? Because it seems like if you are a Charger fan, they couldn't wait to get rid of this guy out there. What are some of the things that you've kind of learned since he's been hired here that you either like or don't like?
Okay, so we'll start with the cons and the things that really struck me and right off the bat were there's a lot of questionable play calling, poor situational football, situational execution. The clock management was really spotty at times last season. They kind of adopted the identity of Anthony Lynn, who has that running mentality, and obviously that was going to be their philosophy with Tyrod Taylor. But even when they turned the keys over to Justin Herbert, they were committed to running the football. They had Austin Eckler, and you have all these different running backs that they were getting into the mix. They just weren't very good at it. They were 30th in the NFL in rush yards per play. And that was their idea. Like, they were running it was backwards, basically. Like, his philosophy was backwards. When you have a quarterback like Justin Herbert, who has a bazooka for an arm, quick release, prototypical size, speed, can get outside the pocket. When you have someone like that can kind of create on his own, I mean, you kind of got to turn him loose. And I don't think that they necessarily took advantage of his entire repertoire of skill set there. And but I mean, I did like that he's an aggressive coach, meaning there's a lot of play action, but a lot of times the play action set up the deep throws. And the Eagles offense in the past couple of years has been very compressed, very stagnant. You had to put together, 12 play drives in order to generate any kind of points. But this one, there's going to be a lot more solely predicated on the deep shots. And that's one thing that I liked. And he also wasn't afraid to give his quarterbacks the liberty to pull the ball down and create yards with their legs if the opportunity presented itself. So, I mean, he's not going to call plays. I highly doubt that he will, because this is Sirianni's first opportunity to do so. But he's going to be heavily involved, and kind of like the Frank Reich, like how Frank Reich was to Doug Peterson. I think will be much like that to Nick Sirianni.
All right, so you obviously see this staff kind of put together, and I know that, maybe we were hoping for a veteran somewhere in there, but now that it's essentially put together, what is your overall take of Nick Sirianni's staff from top to bottom? Because it's pretty much now they got the quarterback coach in here. They've gotten pretty much what do they need? A running back coach? They need a special teams coordinator.
Special teams coach, yeah.
So what are you thinking of this staff top to bottom?
The staff is intriguing. I mean, the one question mark, the main question mark for me, Mike, would be the offensive coordinator position. He's always been he was an interim offensive coordinator in 2019, and then he called plays and took over for the 2020 season. I probably would have went the veteran route with that, just to have a guy there to kind of take a little bit off of Sirianni's plate. He's going to have a lot going on, frankly, as a first-time head coach. Probably going to be a first-time play caller. I doubt that he's going to turn the reins over to Steichen to do that responsibility. But I mean, I think that they went for a home run there with Gannon. Gannon's he was on a lot of teams' lists. He has a gaudy resume. He's very good at developing secondary players. That's an area that the Eagles have struggled mightily in. So I do like what he's done there. And I really like the quarterbacks coach, Brian Johnson. I think he's going to be a star. And we didn't even touch on the tight ends coach, Jason Michael. I like what he did last season with Mo Alley Cox, who was a 2017 undrafted free agent. He played college basketball at Virginia Commonwealth. So, I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell by watching him. He looked remarkably polished, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do to help Dallas Goedert take the next step in his game, and possibly look in the draft here and get a young tight end and see if you can kind of get that 12 personnel going again.
Do these hires say much about how they handled Doug Peterson and his coaching hires? I mean, this essentially just screams Nick Sirianni went in there and said, I wanted these guys, and they kind of went out and got them. And I don't know if that was necessarily the case with Doug, of course. That was the downfall of how it all went down. But I don't know. Or is that a reach, saying that seeing what's going on here doesn't really relate to what happened in the past regime?
Well, I think it's unique with Nick Sirianni, Hunter, because he's been at previous stops. And there's been a lot of, notable coaches that he's kind of built connections with in those stops. So I think he had a little bit more of an extensive Rolodex than, say, Doug Peterson. I think Doug Peterson, I don't know that he knew a lot of coaches. That's why you go the Corey Unlin route, which we all heard was on his list to be a defensive coordinator. You want to promote a Press Taylor. I mean, if you're Nick Sirianni, you know guys from the Chargers, you know guys from the Chiefs, you know guys from the Colts, and so I think there's a lot more guys to go off of, and they felt more confident with him making those decisions, given the trajectory that a lot of those guys were on.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. The coaching staff is kind of put together now, and they got a couple more. I guess they need a special teams coordinator. That's a pretty big deal because Fipp leaving, I mean, he's been here, I think Fipp was hired in the Kelly era. So, I mean, obviously he was a holdover. They had a pretty good special team. Was that?
2013.
He was brought in when? 2013, yeah, the Kelly era. That's not what I said?
Yeah.
All
we were
right.
just, specifying the
okay.
year he came in.
So he's been a holdover from the Kelly era, so they need that position there. And, in fact, they're interviewing a guy who worked for Kelly in San Francisco. But
Michael Clay, right?
I'm not 100. In fact, I didn't even read the name, but I heard he worked for Kelly. Is that who it is?
Yeah, the assistant special teams coach.
Okay.
He's with the 49ers. So, yeah, he would have been there with Chip Kelly.
Yeah, so they obviously went with a very young and inexperienced staff to kind of turn this thing around here. So it'll be interesting to see how it all works out. But Sirianni's going to talk tomorrow. As Andrew said, we'll see what he has to say there. But other than the Wentz stuff, is there something else that you think that he needs to kind of come out? Because, Andrew, there's so many things on this team. I mean, they got salary cap problems at the wazoo. They've got – what about Andre Dillard? What about Jordan Mailata? What's going to happen with Brandon Brooks? Lane Johnson? Are those guys healthy? Jason Kelsey, does he want to play again next year? There's so many other things that what else do you want at the top of your list for Sirianni to hit on tomorrow?
How do you expect to get the offense back on track? I mean, the offense has, taken a step backwards every season since the Super Bowl year. How do you expect to rectify that, or how do you anticipate rectifying that, given that you don't have a whole lot of money to work with? What are your plans for the play? How do you anticipate catering to the players that are already on your roster? That's been one of his calling cards as a coach, playing to the strengths of the guys. Like, what is your system going to look like? What's your offensive philosophy going to be like?
Is he going to call plays?
Are you going to call plays? What's your makeup as a head coach? How do you, are you a good cop? Do you play the good cop, bad cop role like Frank Reich and DiFilippo? Are you able to get after guys? These are fair questions that are going to be asked because let's face it, there's not a lot known about Nick Sirianni.
All right, let's get your quick thought on the Watson situation. And I guess you would wonder, hey, if you're Howie Roseman, are you picking up the phone and maybe pick 6 would be in play for a trade there? Carson Wentz and pick 6. Are you interested in that?
I mean, I think they have to pick the phone up and have that conversation at least. I mean, half the NFL is interested. I mean, I don't know that folks really realize how special Deshaun Watson really is. He's a top 5 quarterback, and I think that if there's any question about Carson Wentz or Jalen Hurts, if you're not 100% sure that either one of those guys can take you where you want to go, I think you have to make that phone call and see where they're at with it, because he's a franchise-changing type of player. And, with Nick Sirianni getting off to a fresh start in Philadelphia here, he could be the quarterback that he can kind of mold and develop and see if he can take the offense to the next level and ultimately to greater heights.
All right, we will talk a lot of NFL offseason draft, free agency, and everything here on Football at 4. Nick Sirianni talks tomorrow at noon. We'll have reaction to that. Adam Kaplan from the Inside the Birds podcast will be on to break down everything Sirianni has to say. Also, Sal Palantonio tomorrow at 3. This has been Football at 4. That is Andrew DiCecco, and he, like all guests, appear via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. All right, Andrew, thanks, man.
You got it, guys. Take care.
All right. And, of course, Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It drops tomorrow morning at 6. And then Adam will be on at 4 tomorrow to kind of break down the whole press conference.